the directors play somewhat of a bigger role in terms of some of the management aspects. Some of it is obviously due to the necessity of the fact that we do not necessarily have all the skill sets available at the management level in some of the state-owned enterprises. At other times, obviously, it has been because there's been a lot of corruption. Most of the state-owned enterprises in Fiji have been corrupt. It's a given. I can probably, all of the organizations that you all are in, I can tell you they'll give you some incident. Some of them may be corrupt in the sense, or have been corrupt in the sense of people taking bribes directly, tender processes not being followed, or people who've been directors on various boards have allowed those statutory bodies or state-owned enterprises to go and procure services from their very own companies, or they have, for example, allowed those finances from those companies to be used for their own public or for their own personal purposes. We have incidents where directors who may be making decisions have received funds from people who are bidding for projects, whether it's paying for their children's school fees or their medical bills, or whether it's been in relation to them funding their properties or getting a loan from them. It would probably be quite unheard of in other jurisdictions. And in Fiji, it has been allowed to happen. A lot of it has been under the guise of, well, it's a cultural thing and it's okay. A lot of it have been, oh, well, it's okay to do it in Fiji, so, let's do it. Or some of it has been, well, we've already declared our interest. So as long as you declare it, but you still partake in a corrupt, or what I would call a non-transparent at the very best practice, it's allowed to take place. In any other jurisdiction where you have a higher level of accountability and transparency, that would not even see even 5 seconds. You'd be out the door. In fact, people would not even do it in the first place. So what we have been trying to do through the Ministry of Public Enterprise is basically lift up the bar. Not lift up the bar and be very different to everybody else. In fact, we want to bring us in line with other best international practices. And that's really the purpose of this. So we hope that what you take from this is the ability, or to be in fact engendered with that idea that there's a certain high level requirement of you as a director, and that your fiduciary duty is to the organization. The board on which you're sitting on, it's your fiduciary duty to that organization. I have seen recently, for example, where you have companies who have an interest in a subsidiary company. This is going to be a very interesting scenario from next year, in particular when we have the company's decree coming to place. So you have a subsidiary company on which you're a board member, and you're also a representative at the holding company level, and you're trying to essentially get the subsidiary company to follow the instructions of the parent company. You can't do that. You can't serve two masters at once, in particular when there's a conflict. Case in point would be FNPF. The FNPF has a number of subsidiary companies. It has a number of equity holdings, or percentage equity holdings in some companies. You cannot have an FNPF person trying to do what they call third-party enforcement in a subsidiary company. So because FNPF is a lender of monies too, if one of their staff or one of their board members is sitting on a subsidiary company, and if the subsidiary company is getting a better rate of loan or interest rate on a loan from outside, FNPF cannot use its muscle to force the subsidiary company to continue to take out a loan with FNPF, where the interest rate on that loan from FNPF is much higher than what that company can get outside. It's dereliction of your duty as a director, and that cannot happen. We have also seen many company directors, again, it's something perhaps peculiar to many of the state-owned enterprises, where you have directors who have served on boards who do not know how to read a balance sheet. They don't even understand what is gearing. debt to equity ratio. So I understand in your session tomorrow, you are going through those aspects of being able to read a balance sheet, being able to know about the financial imperatives and how to make use of it. These are very, very critical issues. Unfortunately, in some of the state-owned enterprises previously, in some of the statutory bodies, when board papers are presented, generally board papers I've seen being presented, less than 24 hours before the board meeting. It's about this thick. So board members are simply supposed to just rubber stamp everything that the management puts in front of it. That should not happen at all. And that's what we're trying to inculcate in you as a director, to firstly set the standards in your organization, that your organization, your management of your organization need to give you board papers on time, for example. I have seen, for example, when vetting board papers of various statutory bodies for the Prime Minister and various other ministers, that sometimes the management will put a decision-making board paper under information paper. So you can rubber stamp it and it goes through. So, and these are critical decisions that need to be made. So there is, unfortunately, and we have to start off from that premise, there is a culture of dishonesty in Fiji. Whether it is not directly necessarily always about taking a bribe in a brown paper bag, but that culture of dishonesty, I suppose, is a culture of non-transparency. You push things through, and the board members are always there to rubber stamp it. We need board members who can actually really and truly scrutinize papers. They know exactly what is being presented to them. It is only then that we can realize the true potential of the organizations on which you are serving as board members. There are many state-owned enterprises and statutory bodies that actually can do quite well. And I think it has perhaps been the lack of direction or leadership within many of these organizations. Under the Bainimarama government, we have tried as much as possible to get a vast array of people to sit on the different boards. Under previous governments, you probably could count on both your hands, probably about 10 people who sat on basically about all boards. We are now trying to get as many different people as possible with different skill sets. Unfortunately, we have been somewhat restricted in the pool of people that we could choose from because of the travel bans imposed by Australia and New Zealand. So, people obviously were worried about the fact they cannot travel anymore, or their spouses, or their children, or their grandfathers and relatives and everybody else. These are blanket travel bans. But hopefully that's kind of easing off. And the Bainimarama government has a policy to appoint the right people for the right jobs. So in that way, hopefully you'll be able to work with a better crop of people on your board. And I urge you to please take full cognizance of the papers that are being presented, and also yourselves to give feedback to the course facilitators, because they may not be necessarily aware of some of the peculiarities that exist in Fiji and how to handle those situations. And I'm grateful that the Australian Institute of Directors has presented this course to us. We hope to do more in the future. But I think at the end of the day, what you could take from this is that here's a learning opportunity for you to be able to contribute positively to the organization on which you serve as a board member. And by doing that and taking a professional approach, you not only will be assisting the organization on which you're a board member of, but also overall contribute towards the growth of the economy, growth of a lot more accountability within Fiji overall. One of the critical issues also, of course, has been in terms of the selection of human resources we have seen. There are many people who believe that just because they are once in the system, that they continue to be in the system, irrespective of how their performance goes, irrespective of perhaps some of the dodgy dealings they may be dealt with. And again, as directors who have a responsibility of sometimes appointing people or having a say, for example, in the appointment of senior management, you as directors need to have your loyalty not to the individual. And we've seen that. People say, we can't really fire this guy because he will be without a job. Well, the person has to perform. because your fiduciary duty is to the company, not to the individual. And we also have this culture of personalities in Fiji, and we need to move away from that. Because the reality is, the growth rate that Fiji has at the moment, and with all projections, even by various multilateral agencies, and the various reforms that have been put in place, indeed they are quite revolutionary when you think about what used to happen in Fiji about even 5 years ago. If we do not change the cultural machinations within the companies, within our society itself, we'll lose that opportunity. But if we are able to get up to speed with running our organizations well in a transparent manner, with all the best international practices, Fiji is on the cusp of greatness. We can indeed become like Singapore. If you look at some of the Singaporean state-owned enterprises, they're a lot better than private enterprises. In fact, the benchmark is set by the state-owned enterprise in Singapore. Temasek Holdings, which is the holding company of all the state-owned businesses in Singapore, and that's what we should be doing. That's the kind of standard that we should be setting for the private sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, with those few words, thank you once again for your participation. There are numerous opportunities in Fiji, as I've said, and you can all contribute very positively towards it. And I'd like to thank once again the Institute from Australia for their contribution. And we look forward to doing bigger and better things. Vinaka, have a good afternoon.